Well, I've been playing around with the GH4 and testing it out, so I thought I'd share some footage and just my kind of first impressions and opinions. Now, the first thing that everyone talks about with the GH4 is 4K. And while there's not a lot of people watching content in 4K, most TVs are still 1080p. Most people on the internet, on YouTube, are, half the time they're watching in standard def still, just because of internet speeds. But 4K is interesting because, well, it might not be a final delivery format yet. It's kind of moving that direction with Hollywood. The advantages it gives you in post-production are just incredible in terms of reframing, punching in for, a second camera look, quote unquote, and then also just the resolution compared to other DSLRs. One of my biggest frustrations with Nikon and Canon DSLRs in particular is their claimed 1080p HD isn't that. It's not the true resolution 1080p. It's mushy, it's soft, you look at it 100% and there's just no clarity there. And the GH4 4K looks fantastic. It's incredible the amount of resolution you can get out of it. And another thing I really like about the GH4 is it feels really well built. I had a GH1 and I bought it at the time because it was a cheap DSLR camera that would give me that shallow depth of field. It was hacked, so I could kind of get a little bit more resolution out of it. But it felt very plasticky, felt like a consumer toy camera almost. And the GH4, I didn't have any hands-on experience with the GH3. I've shot tons of stuff with the GH1 and GH2, and the GH4 just feels like a remarkable step up in terms of build quality. The buttons and the ergonomics of it are laid out in a way much similar to other professional DSLR cameras. So if you have to share it with a friend or give it to somebody else, they can at least kind of figure out where things should be located in terms of the buttons. And the GH4, there's not a ton of buttons, but all the buttons that are there serve a purpose and have a function, which is really nice. So this more pro build also complements itself well with the pro features in the camera. One of the things I really like is you can actually pick to use a shutter angle instead of a traditional shutter speed as in you would in photography, like 1/200, 1/50, which a lot of people use for, 1080p 24, they want 1/50. But on the GH4, you can actually use your shutter angle. So you get that 180 degree shutter no matter what frame rate mode you're in. So you want to shoot high frame rate, the shutter speed automatically compensates to 180 degree. And that's just such a really, really nice feature that, maybe it's not like a selling point on the box, but for me, that just makes shooting so much easier. Just, hey, I want 180 degree shutter. Let's leave it at that. You can also pick your luma range if you want to shoot from 16 to 235 or 0 to 255. You have that option in the menu. And that too is just, no one's going to go out and buy a camera because of that one feature, but having it there additionally is just so nice. And you can pick your recording format if you want MOV, you want MP4, if you're doing AVC HD, you're doing all I, 4K, 1080p. You have just so many options in the GH4 that whatever you need for your work, you have that option there. You can pick it, whatever suits your needs. And another really cool feature on the GH4 is the slow motion. You can do 1080 60 frames a second, but you can also do 1080 96 frames a second. And that's a 25% slowdown of your footage. And that's not like phantom levels, but if you want those really, really, really slow shots, you go out, you rent one of those cameras. But just built right into your 4K camera, the ability to do higher frame rate stuff is awesome. The Canon 1DC doesn't let you do that. The 5D Mark III will let you do 60 frames at 720, but not even 1080. So you really start to see how this DSLR technology is moving forward, and Panasonic is stepping up their game and offering more features than Canon and Nikon at similar price points. The GH4 is half the price of a new Mark III. So it's like that the Canon cameras get a lot of credit just for they have the first ones that kind of did this stuff, the shallow depth of field, video on a DSLR, but they're not adding the feature sets that they need to be attracting consumers. And the GH4 has so many features. It's also got the micro 4/3 lens mount, it can be a plus or minus, depends on how you look at it. Micro 4/3, you can adapt pretty much any lens that's ever been made to work on the GH4. However, that's only manual focus and, if it has a manual aperture. Now, if you have a bunch of Canon autofocus electronic lenses, you're not going to have those features on the GH4. So it can depend, what have you invested in? If you want to get invested in micro 4/3 lenses, is that something you need for the stabilization or the autofocus or focus tracking, which you can do in video mode very smoothly on the GH4. You know, me personally, I own all older Nikon glass that has a manual aperture ring. I bought in that system just because it has the most adaptability. I can use them on Canon bodies, on Nikon bodies, on Panasonic bodies, on Sony DSLRs. I have that option and flexibility in my lens system. I didn't buy into Micro Four Thirds lenses because those don't cover full frame. And down the road, maybe there will be a full frame camera that does 4K at $1,600 like the GH4, but that doesn't exist yet. But I'm always looking down the road, long term. What lens system do I want to get into? I really like Micro Four Thirds because I can take any lens out there, put it on the GH4, and have it work for video anyway, doing manual focus and manual aperture. But if you're wanting to use the GH4 for still photography, you're going to want autofocus and you're going to want stabilization. And so those features you might have to consider investing in Micro Four Thirds lenses. And is that something you want to do? It's just something to consider. The GH4 has a great battery life, much better than the GH2. I can't really compare it to the GH3 because, like I said, I haven't really shot anything with the GH3. But the GH4 battery I'm very happy with, lasts a good while. I'm not changing batteries constantly like I was in the GH2. And another thing I'm so happy for, and I think they changed this on the GH3, but the actual audio input, it's a proper 1/8 inch stereo input, not that goofy, tinier, that small input they used to use on phones and everything, where you're like, who has this input? It's this half-size headphone jack. Like, just give me a regular, 1/8 inch input. And speaking of audio inputs, Panasonic is selling the additional XLR HDSDI adapter, which that doesn't really appeal to me. It just makes the camera bigger, bulkier. I don't really need to do that. There's other devices that I could record separately my audio. Panasonic's adapter, I'm not super interested in. Seems more like something you'd want for the specific HDSDI needs if that's how you're running your setup in a larger scale venue or something. But it doesn't really appeal to me. But one thing that is cool that is an external adapter recorder is the Atomos Shogun that they just announced, where it's going to record 4K 10-bit 422 ProRes files. Like, the GH4, the internal codec, you can record 4K to an SD card, which when I was setting up the camera, the SD card I had in there wouldn't let me record 4K to it. It was grayed out in the menu and I couldn't select it. So I had to switch to a faster speed SD card. So it's cool that the camera tells you that, but you can't use any SD card. You need a high-speed one. But the one I have is nothing special. It wasn't very expensive. Just a 32 gig, UHS 1 card that works great. But, if you don't like 420 8-bit codecs, Atomos, the Shogun, will allow you to get 4K 422 10-bit color at 4K, which is huge. You also can get higher frame rate stuff. And I don't know exactly how the output on the GH4 works over HDMI, but that option, that flexibility is huge considering, the 5D Mark III gained a lot of online traction when people are talking about the RAW hack and being able to get all the resolution and all this color information out of the camera, which is really cool. But the post-production workflow for that is just very constricting. It slows you down by a large amount. The files are huge. Well, with the Atomos Shogun, you actually have an external recorder that is a monitor as well. You have your screen so you can see what you're filming. So I think it's a 7-inch screen, and you can get the higher color accuracy out of it recording that way, which is huge for anyone who thinks that the internal 420 8-bit codec isn't enough. A lot of cool features on the GH4. I'm really happy with the image. There's so many cool features that Panasonic has put into this camera for a really affordable price. And it's just a lot of fun to use. It gets me excited about going out and filming stuff, having the option of doing 4K, doing these slow-mo things, being able to pick my curves and pick my color settings in the camera. It's a lot of fun to use, and I had a great time filming these past couple days, and I'm looking forward to all the cool stuff I'm going to be able to film with the GH4.